There are some people in this world who simply fade into the background, not because they want to, but because that's where life has placed them. This is a story about one such person, a young woman who spent most of her life being overlooked by the people who should have seen her the most. Her name was Riley, and she was 28 years old when this story truly begins. But to understand what happened, you need to know what her life was like before everything changed. Riley lived in a small apartment on the edge of town. Every morning she woke up at 7, made herself a simple breakfast of toast and coffee, and took the bus to work. She was a secretary at Patterson and Associates, a tiny accounting firm tucked between a dry cleaner and a sandwich shop. The office had brown carpet that had seen better days, fluorescent lights that hummed constantly, and exactly 4 employees, including her. Her job wasn't glamorous. She answered phones, filed papers, scheduled appointments, and made sure the coffee machine was always full. Her boss, Mr. Patterson, was a kind man in his 60s who barely looked up from his spreadsheets. Her coworkers were nice enough, but they talked mostly about their own lives, their kids, their weekend plans. Riley listened and smiled, but rarely shared anything about herself. Because honestly, what was there to share? At least that's what she thought most people believed about her, that she was just ordinary, forgettable even. This feeling wasn't new. It had been there her whole life, like a shadow she couldn't shake off. Riley came from a family of achievers. Her older brother Daniel was a cardiologist at the city's best hospital. He was always busy, always important, always saving lives. When he came to family dinners, everyone hung on his every word. He'd talk about complicated surgeries and medical conferences, and their parents would beam with pride. Then there was her younger sister, Victoria. At just 25, Victoria had already made partner at a prestigious law firm downtown. She wore expensive suits, carried a leather briefcase, and had her face on a billboard advertising her firm's services. She was sharp, confident, and always seemed to know exactly what to say. And then there was Riley, somewhere in the middle. The one who answered phones for a living. Don't get her wrong. Her family wasn't cruel. They didn't mock her or put her down. They were just preoccupied. When they gathered for Sunday dinners at their parents' house, the conversation naturally flowed toward Daniel's patients or Victoria's cases. Riley would sit there pushing food around her plate, waiting for someone to ask about her week. Sometimes her mother would remember. "And how are things at the office, sweetheart?" she'd ask, her tone kind but distracted, already glancing toward Daniel, who was about to say something. "Fine," Riley would answer, "same as always." And that would be that. Her father was a retired engineer, practical and logical. He'd pat her shoulder occasionally and tell her she was doing just fine. But his eyes lit up differently when he talked to Daniel about medical technology or debated legal theory with Victoria. Riley had tried over the years to find something that would make them see her. Really see her. In college, she'd taken up pottery. She'd spent a whole semester creating bowls and vases, even making a set of mugs for each family member for Christmas. They'd thanked her politely, used them once or twice, and then the mugs ended up in the back of kitchen cabinets, forgotten. Then there was photography. She'd saved up for a decent camera and spent months learning about composition and lighting. She'd even put together a small album of family photos for her mother's birthday. Her mother had flipped through it quickly, said it was lovely, and set it on a bookshelf where it collected dust. After a while, Riley stopped trying so hard. She convinced herself that maybe some people were meant to be in the background. Maybe she was just one of those supporting characters in other people's stories. But then something happened. Something that started small. So small that even Riley herself didn't realize it would change everything. 3 years before the day that would change her life, Riley was walking home from the bus stop when she passed a thrift store. In the window, among the used furniture and old lamps, sat an upright piano. It was scratched, probably out of tune, and had a price tag that said $200. Riley stopped walking. She stared at that piano for a long time. She'd taken piano lessons as a child, like many kids do. She'd been decent at it, nothing special, and had quit when she was 12 because her teacher moved away and her parents never got around to finding a new one. She hadn't touched a piano in 16 years, but something about seeing that instrument in the window made her chest feel tight, a feeling she couldn't quite name, like longing but deeper. Before she could talk herself out of it, she walked into the store and bought it. Getting that piano up 3 flights of stairs to her apartment was an adventure involving 2 confused delivery men and several close calls with the banister. When they finally set it down in her small living room, it took up nearly a quarter of the space. Riley sat on the creaky bench and lifted the fallboard, revealing yellowed keys. She pressed middle C. The note rang out slightly flat but still beautiful to her ears, and just like that, something woke up inside her. She started small, 20 minutes a day after work, relearning basics she'd forgotten. Her fingers were stiff at first, stumbling over simple scales, but she kept going. She bought beginner books from the used bookstore. She watched free tutorials online, pausing and rewinding countless times to catch the finger positions. Her neighbors complained twice about the noise. She bought a practice mute pedal and adjusted her schedule, playing earlier in the evening. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into a year. Riley's fingers grew stronger, more confident. She moved from children's songs to simple classical pieces. She learned to read music fluently again, to understand rhythm and tempo and dynamics. She never told her family. Not because it was a secret exactly, but because she'd learned that her interests didn't really register with them. At Sunday dinners, when the conversation allowed, she'd mention casually, "I've been learning piano again." "Oh, that's nice, honey," her mother would say, already turning to Victoria. "Now tell us more about that big case you won." Her father would nod vaguely in her direction before asking Daniel about some new medical procedure he'd read about. After a few of these non-reactions, Riley stopped mentioning it altogether. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It can either crush you, or it can free you. For Riley, it became freedom. Without the pressure of anyone's expectations, without anyone watching or judging, she could pursue this thing purely for herself. The piano became her secret world, the one place where she didn't have to be the invisible middle child or the forgettable secretary. When she sat at those keys, she was something else entirely. She just didn't know yet that one day everyone else would see it too. Riley's life began to split into 2 versions. There was the version everyone saw, the quiet secretary who blended into the background. And then there was the version that existed only in her apartment, in those hours between work and sleep, when her fingers danced across piano keys and she became someone entirely different. By the end of her first year of practice, she'd made more progress than she'd ever imagined possible, but she wanted more. She needed more. That's when she made a decision that changed everything. She started waking up at 5 in the morning. The first week was brutal. Her alarm would shatter the darkness and she'd lie there wondering what possessed her to do this. But then she'd remember the feeling of playing, that rush of creating something beautiful, and somehow her feet would hit the cold floor. She'd stumble to her tiny kitchen, make strong coffee, and sit at the piano while the world outside was still dark. There was something magical about those early hours. The building was silent. The street below was empty. It was just her and the music. Her downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Walsh, knocked on her door one morning at 6:30. Riley's heart sank as she opened it, preparing for another complaint, but Mrs. Walsh was smiling. "I just wanted you to know," the elderly woman said. "Your playing is the most lovely way to wake up." "Please don't stop," Riley nearly cried. It was such a small thing, but it meant everything. Someone had actually listened. The early morning practice sessions became sacred to her. She'd play for 90 minutes before work, her fingers growing stronger and more precise with each passing day. At the office, she'd sometimes catch herself tapping out rhythms on her desk, hearing melodies in her head while she filed papers. Her coworkers noticed she seemed different, though they couldn't quite put their finger on how. She smiled more, maybe, seemed more present even in her quietness. "You seem happy lately," Mr. Patterson mentioned one afternoon while she refilled his coffee. "Got a boyfriend or something?" Riley laughed. "No, nothing like that, just found something I enjoy doing." He nodded and went back to his spreadsheets, not asking what that something was. She didn't mind. Her piano was hers alone, but as her skill grew, so did her hunger to improve. The free online tutorials could only take her so far. She needed real instruction, someone who could catch her mistakes and push her further. That's when she found out about Helen Chen. Mrs. Chen was 72 years old and had been a concert pianist in her youth, performing in halls across Europe and Asia. She'd retired to a quiet life after her husband passed, but still took on occasional students. Her rates were reasonable, though even reasonable felt expensive to Riley. The problem was, Mrs. Chen lived all the way across the city. Getting there required taking 3 different buses, a journey that ate up nearly 2 hours round trip. Riley did the math. She could afford 1 lesson every 2 weeks if she cut back on everything else. And she meant everything. She stopped buying lunch at the deli next to her office and started bringing sandwiches from home. She quit her streaming subscriptions. She started walking to the bus stop that was farther away, because it saved $1 on fare. She kept her apartment cooler in winter and warmer in summer to save on utilities. Her co-workers invited her out for Friday happy hours. She always declined. They asked if she wanted to chip in for someone's birthday cake. She contributed the minimum. They probably thought she was cheap. Let them think it. Every dollar saved was another lesson, another step closer to becoming the pianist she dreamed of being. Mrs. Chen's apartment was small but filled with light. A beautiful grand piano sat by the window, its black surface polished to a mirror shine. The first time Riley sat at it and played, she almost couldn't believe the sound. It was like the difference between speaking through a phone and speaking face to face. "You have raw talent," Mrs. Chen said after hearing her play that first day. "But more importantly, you have something many talented people lack. You have dedication." Mrs. Chen was a strict teacher, but never mean. She'd stop Riley mid-piece with a sharp tap of her cane. "Again, your left hand is rushing. The accompaniment must breathe with the melody, not chase it." Riley would play it again, and again, and again. Sometimes their hour-long lessons would stretch to 2 hours because Mrs. Chen got caught up in helping Riley perfect a particular passage. She never charged extra for that time. "When I see someone who truly wants to learn," she'd say, "how can I watch the clock?" Between lessons, Riley practiced obsessively. She'd work on the same 4 measures for an entire week if that's what it took to get them right. Her neighbors never complained again. Even the ones who used to roll their eyes now seemed to enjoy it. One left a note under her door. "Keep playing. You're getting really good." After 18 months of lessons, Mrs. Chen made a suggestion that terrified Riley. "There's a small competition next month," she said. "Local pianists, mostly amateurs and students. You should enter." Riley's stomach dropped. "I couldn't, I'm not ready for that." "You're more ready than you think. And it's not about winning, it's about learning to perform under pressure. That's a skill too." Riley went home and thought about it for days. The idea of playing in front of strangers, of being judged, made her feel sick. But there was another feeling too underneath the fear. Excitement. She entered under the name R. Thompson. She didn't want anyone to know it was her, especially not her family. If she crashed and burned, at least it would be anonymous. The competition was held in a community center on a Saturday afternoon. There were maybe 30 people in the audience, mostly family members of other performers. Riley's hands shook so badly she could barely sign in. She played Chopin's waltz in a minor. She made 2 mistakes, small ones that probably only she and Mrs. Chen noticed. But she finished, and when she stood up from the bench, a few people actually clapped with enthusiasm. Not just polite obligation. She didn't win. She didn't even place. But she'd done it. She'd played for other people and survived. She entered 3 more competitions over the next year, each one under her pseudonym. Each time she got a little less nervous, a little more confident. She started to feel like maybe, just maybe, she was becoming a real pianist. At Sunday dinners, her family talked about Daniel's research paper that got published in a medical journal. They celebrated Victoria making the local news for winning a high-profile case. Riley sat quietly, eating her mother's pot roast, holding inside her the secret of who she was becoming. Sometimes she wanted to tell them. She'd open her mouth, ready to say, "I've been studying piano seriously for almost 3 years now. I've performed in competitions. I'm actually pretty good." But then Daniel would launch into another story, or her father would ask Victoria for legal advice about something, and the moment would pass. Riley told herself it didn't matter. She was doing this for herself, not for their approval. But deep down, in a place she rarely let herself examine, she wondered what it would feel like if they actually saw her. Really saw her. She had no idea that moment was coming sooner than she thought. And when it did, everything would change. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Riley was at work organizing files in the back room when her phone buzzed. It was Daniel, her brother. He never called during the day. "Riley, you need to come to Memorial Hospital." "It's Mom." The words hit her like cold water. "What happened?" "Heart attack. She's stable now, but you need to come." Riley's hands were shaking so badly she could barely grab her purse. She told Mr. Patterson there was a family emergency and rushed out, not even bothering to turn off her computer. The bus ride to the hospital felt like it took hours, though it was only 20 minutes. Every stoplight, every delay felt like torture. When she finally reached the cardiac unit, she found her father sitting in the waiting area, his face gray and tired. Victoria was pacing near the window, still in her work suit, mascara smudged under her eyes. Daniel was talking to a doctor, his professional mask on, but Riley could see the fear underneath. "How is she?" Riley asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her father looked up, and for the first time in years she saw him look truly old. "She's going to be okay. They did an angioplasty, but it was close, Riley. Too close. They let them see her one at a time." When Riley's turn came, she walked into that hospital room and felt her heart break a little. Her mother had always been so vibrant, so full of energy. Now she looked small in that bed, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that beeped and hummed. Her mother's eyes opened when Riley took her hand. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered. "Hey, Mom." Riley tried to smile, but tears were already streaming down her face. "You scared us." "Scared myself, too." Her mother's laugh came out as more of a cough. "Guess I'm not as young as I thought." They sat in silence for a while, just holding hands. Riley didn't know what to say. What do you say when you realize the person you've always thought would be there forever might not be? Her mother came home after 5 days. The doctor said she'd need rest, lots of it. They'd put in a stent, adjusted her medications, and given the family strict instructions about diet and stress. But she was alive. She was going to recover, except she didn't, not really. Not in the way that mattered. The physical healing happened. Her heart function improved. Her test results got better. But something else had broken inside her, something the doctors couldn't fix with surgery or pills. Riley's mother had always been the center of their family. She'd been the one who organized Sunday dinners, who remembered everyone's birthdays, who called to check in just because. She'd worked as a teacher for 30 years, shaping young minds, always busy, always purposeful. Now she spent most of her days in bed, staring out the window at nothing. Riley's father tried everything. He made her favorite meals, which she barely touched. He suggested short walks in the garden, but she was too tired. He put on her favorite shows, but she'd just stare at the screen without really watching. "It's depression," Daniel explained during one family meeting. "It's common after major cardiac events. The brush with mortality, the loss of independence. It can be overwhelming." Victoria researched therapists and support groups. Their father hired a home health aide. They all took turns visiting, trying to coax their mother back to life. But nothing worked. Riley started coming over every day after work. She'd let herself in with her key, climb the stairs to her parents' bedroom, and find her mother in the same position as the day before. Propped up on pillows, looking out the window, her eyes distant and sad. "Hey, Mom," Riley would say, pulling up the chair next to the bed. "Hello, sweetheart." Always the same greeting. In the same flat voice, they'd sit together, sometimes talking, mostly not. Riley would tell her about work, about Mr. Patterson's terrible jokes, about the new deli that opened up next to the office. Small talk, meaningless chatter just to fill the silence. Her mother would nod occasionally, but Riley could tell she wasn't really listening. She was somewhere else, somewhere dark that Riley couldn't reach. Daniel came on weekends, but his shifts at the hospital were long. Victoria managed to visit twice a week between court dates and client meetings. Their father was there constantly, of course, but he looked more exhausted every day. "I don't know what to do," he confided in Riley one evening. They were in the kitchen and he was trying to get her mother to eat some soup. "I feel like I'm losing her even though she's right here." Riley hugged him. This strong man who'd always seemed unshakable, now trembling in her arms. The weeks crawled by. Spring turned to early summer. The world outside kept moving, but inside that bedroom time seemed frozen. Riley kept coming every day. She'd finish work at 5, take the bus to her parents' house and sit with her mother until 8 or 9 at night. Then she'd go home to her tiny apartment and sit at her piano. Too exhausted to practice, just pressing keys quietly, looking for comfort in the only place she'd ever found it. Mrs. Chen noticed during their lessons that Riley's playing had become mechanical. lifeless. "What's wrong?" she asked one afternoon after Riley butchered a piece she'd mastered months ago. Riley told her everything. About the heart attack, about her mother's depression, about how helpless she felt watching someone she loved slip away. Mrs. Chen listened quietly, then said something Riley would never forget. "Music has power, you know. Real power. Not to fix everything, but to reach people in places words can't go." Riley thought about that for days. She thought about it during her silent visits with her mother. She thought about it on the long bus rides home. She thought about it late at night when she couldn't sleep. An idea started forming in her mind. Crazy, probably. Terrifying, definitely. But it wouldn't leave her alone. What if she played for her mother? Really played for her. Showed her what she'd been doing for the past 3 years. Let her mother see this part of her that no one else knew existed. But the thought of being that vulnerable, of revealing something so personal and precious, made her stomach twist with anxiety. What if she played and her mother didn't care? What if she poured her heart out through music and it still wasn't enough to reach her? She pushed the idea away for weeks. Too scary. Too risky. Then one evening, she was sitting beside her mother's bed in the usual silence. Her mother was staring out the window at the sunset, and suddenly she spoke. "I'm so tired, Riley." Her voice was barely audible. "So tired of feeling like this. Like everything that made me who I was is just gone." Riley squeezed her hand. "You're still you, Mom." Her mother turned to look at her, really look at her for the first time in weeks. "Am I? I don't feel like it. I don't feel like anything anymore." Something cracked open in Riley's chest. She couldn't watch this anymore. She couldn't sit by and do nothing while her mother faded away. That night she went home and called Daniel and Victoria. She told them she had an idea. It was going to sound strange, maybe even stupid, but she needed their help. "I want to play piano for Mom," she said. "A real performance. Something beautiful. I think music might reach her when nothing else can." There was silence on the line. "You play piano?" Victoria finally asked, confused. "Yes," Riley said quietly. "I've been playing seriously for 3 years. And I'm good. I'm really good. Trust me on this." More silence. Then Daniel spoke. "Okay, what do you need from us?" Riley closed her eyes, relief flooding through her. "I need everyone to come. You, Victoria, Dad, I need Mom to be there. And I need you all to just listen. Really listen." She had no idea if it would work, but she had to try. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room has the loudest thing to say. They've just been waiting for the right moment to say it. The hardest part wasn't convincing her family to come. The hardest part was the 3 days Riley spent waiting for Sunday afternoon to arrive. She'd arranged everything with the hospital's patient services coordinator. Memorial Hospital had a small chapel on the 2nd floor, rarely used except for the occasional service or quiet reflection. It had a piano, an old but well-maintained upright that the coordinator assured her was kept in tune. Riley visited the chapel twice before Sunday, sitting at that piano in the empty room, testing the keys, getting comfortable with the touch. It was heavier than Mrs. Chen's grand piano, lighter than her own upright at home. She'd have to adjust. Mrs. Chen had helped her choose the piece, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, her teacher had said. "You've mastered it beautifully. But more than that, it has the emotion you need. It speaks of longing, of tenderness, of hope emerging from darkness." Riley practiced it obsessively those 3 days. In the early mornings before work, during her lunch break on a practice keyboard app on her phone, in the evenings until her fingers ached. She dreamed about it at night, hearing the melody in her sleep. Sunday morning, she woke up at 4 a.m. and couldn't get back to sleep. Her stomach was doing flips. She made coffee with shaking hands and sat at her own piano, playing through the Nocturne one more time. What if she messed up? What if her fingers froze? What if she played perfectly and it still didn't matter, didn't reach her mother, didn't change anything? She pushed the thoughts away and focused on the music. Just the music. At 1 o'clock, she arrived at the hospital. She wore a simple blue dress, the nicest one she owned, and carried her sheet music even though she'd memorized every note. The chapel was on the 2nd floor, down a quiet hallway away from the busy wards. The room was small and peaceful. Afternoon light streamed through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the wooden pews. The piano sat at the front waiting. Riley sat down and played a few scales to warm up. The sound filled the space beautifully. Good acoustics. That helped. At 1:30, they started arriving. Her father came first, pushing her mother in a wheelchair. Her mother was dressed in real clothes for the first time in weeks. A soft purple cardigan Riley had given her for Christmas 2 years ago. But her face still had that faraway look, that emptiness that had become so familiar. Victoria arrived next, checking her phone one last time before turning it off. She looked confused, curious, maybe a little skeptical. She'd taken time away from preparing for a big trial to be here. Riley hoped it would be worth it. Daniel came rushing in at 1:40, apologizing for being late. He'd been called in for an emergency consult. Still in his scrubs under his jacket, he looked exhausted but gave Riley an encouraging smile. A few hospital staff members had also slipped in. The patient coordinator who'd helped Riley arrange this, a nurse from the cardiac unit who'd taken care of her mother, Mrs. Walsh from Riley's apartment building, who'd somehow heard about this and taken 2 buses to be there, and in the back row, sitting quietly with her hands folded, was Mrs. Chen. Riley hadn't expected her to come, hadn't even thought to invite her. But there she was, her elderly teacher who'd spent 2 years helping her become the pianist she was today. Their eyes met. Mrs. Chen nodded once, a gesture that said everything. "You can do this. I believe in you." Riley stood up and walked to the front of the chapel. Her legs felt unsteady. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice quieter than she'd intended. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I know this seems strange, but I needed to share something with you. With all of you, but especially with Mom." Her mother was looking at her now, a flicker of attention in her tired eyes. "For the past 3 years, I've been learning to play piano. Really learning, not just as a hobby. I've taken lessons, entered competitions, practiced every single day. And I never told any of you because..." She paused, feeling tears starting to build. "Because I didn't think you'd care. I didn't think it mattered enough." Victoria shifted in her seat, uncomfortable. Daniel looked down at his hands. "But it matters to me," Riley continued. "And Mom, I need you to know something. Every note I learned, every hour I practiced, every small achievement along the way, I wished I could share it with you. You've always been the person I most wanted to make proud." Her mother's eyes were wet now, tears sliding down her cheeks. "So I'm going to play for you now. And I hope this music can say what I've never been able to find words for." Riley sat at the piano. She placed her fingers on the keys. She took one deep breath, then another, and she began to play. The first notes of the nocturne floated into the air, delicate and achingly beautiful. Riley forgot about everyone watching, forgot about her nerves. There was only the music and the story it told. Her right hand carried the melody, singing out with a sweetness that seemed to fill every corner of the room. Her left hand provided the gentle accompaniment like a heartbeat, steady and true. She'd played this piece hundreds of times in practice, but this time was different. This time she poured everything into it. Every lonely Sunday dinner where she'd felt invisible. Every early morning practice session when her fingers hurt and she kept going anyway. Every moment of doubt, every small triumph, every hope she'd carried quietly inside her. The music swelled and retreated like waves. There were passages of such tenderness they seemed to ache, moments of brightness that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. The nocturne built to its climax, her fingers dancing across the keys with confidence and grace, then softened again into something almost like a whisper. She could feel the emotion of it moving through her, past her, out into the room. This was why she'd fallen in love with music, because it could express things too deep for words. In the audience, her father had his hand over his mouth. Victoria was crying openly, not bothering to wipe the tears away. Daniel was leaning forward, completely still, transfixed, and her mother. Her mother's face had transformed. The emptiness was gone, replaced by something alive and awake. She was weeping, both hands pressed to her heart, her whole body seeming to lean toward the music like a flower turning toward the sun. Riley played the final phrases, letting each note linger and fade. The last chord hung in the air for a long moment before dissolving into silence. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence was so complete Riley could hear her own breathing. Then her mother spoke, her voice broken but clear. Riley, just her name. But the way she said it held everything. Riley stood up from the piano on shaking legs. Before she could take a step, Her mother was trying to get up from the wheelchair, reaching for her with trembling arms. "Careful," the nurse said, moving to help. But her mother waved her away. Riley rushed forward and knelt beside the wheelchair. Her mother grabbed her face with both hands, looking at her like she was seeing her for the first time. "My baby," her mother whispered. "My beautiful, talented baby. How did I not see this? How did I not see you?" Riley collapsed into her mother's arms and they held each other while they both cried. Years of feeling invisible, of being overlooked, seemed to wash away in that embrace. She felt more hands on her shoulders. Her father pulling both of them into his arms. Then Victoria and Daniel surrounding them, everyone holding everyone, a family finally seeing each other clearly. When they finally pulled apart, Riley's mother wouldn't let go of her hand. "Play it again," she said, "please. I want to hear it again." So Riley did. She sat back down at the piano and this time she played with joy instead of nerves. She played and her family listened, really listened, and for the first time in her life, Riley felt completely, truly seen. The change in Riley's mother didn't happen overnight, but it started that Sunday afternoon in the chapel, and it grew from there like a seed finally getting the light it needed. That evening, after everyone had left the hospital, Riley's mother asked to go home. Not to rest in bed like she'd been doing for weeks, but to sit in the living room. She wanted the windows open. She wanted music playing. She wanted to be part of the world again. "What you did today," she told Riley before she left, still holding her daughter's hand like she might disappear. "You gave me something to feel again. Do you understand? I've been so numb, so lost. But hearing you play, seeing what you'd become without any of us even noticing, it woke something up inside me." Riley squeezed her hand. "I just played piano, Mom." "No," her mother said firmly. "You showed me that beautiful things can grow even when no one's watching. That dedication and passion and love don't need an audience to be real. You reminded me that life still has surprises, still has beauty. I forgot that. I needed to remember." Over the next few days, Riley's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Daniel called to apologize for never asking more about her life, for always being too busy to really listen. Victoria sent a long text message admitting she'd been so focused on her own achievements that she'd failed to see her sisters. Her father showed up at her apartment that Wednesday evening, something he'd never done before. He stood in her tiny living room looking at the upright piano that took up so much space, and shook his head in amazement. "Your mother told me you practice every morning at 5, he said. "For 3 years. I had no idea you had that kind of discipline in you. I'm sorry I never asked. I'm sorry I never really saw you, Riley." It was the first time Riley could remember her father apologizing for anything. "You see me now," Riley said simply. "That's what matters." But the biggest change was in her mother. Within 2 weeks, she was out of bed most of the day. She started taking short walks again, first just to the mailbox, then around the block. She returned to her book club. She called old friends she'd been avoiding. And every Sunday, instead of the usual dinner where Daniel and Victoria dominated the conversation, her mother insisted on something new. She wanted to hear Riley play. So Sunday dinners moved to Riley's apartment, cramped as it was. They'd squeeze around her small table for a simple meal, and then Riley would play for them. Sometimes just one piece, sometimes several. Her family would sit and listen, really listen, in a way they'd never listened to anything before. Victoria started bringing her girlfriend, a quiet woman named Jordan who worked as a pediatric nurse. "I wanted her to meet the real you," Victoria told Riley. "Not the version I described before, the sister I thought I knew. The actual you." Mrs. Chen came to one of these Sunday gatherings and met Riley's family. "Your daughter has a rare gift," she told them. "Not just talent, though she has plenty of that. She has heart. She plays with her whole soul." Riley's mother started coming to her lessons sometimes, sitting quietly in the corner of Mrs. Chen's apartment while Riley worked on difficult passages. Just being there, supporting her, making up for lost time. 3 months after the chapel performance, Mrs. Chen told Riley about a competition. Not a small local one like the others Riley had entered anonymously. This was the regional classical piano competition, a prestigious event that attracted serious musicians from across the state. "I think you're ready," Mrs. Chen said. "More than ready." Riley felt the old fear creeping in. "That's a completely different level. Those are real pianists, people who've trained their whole lives. And you're not a real pianist?" Mrs. Chen raised an eyebrow. You've practiced more hours in 3 years than most people practice in 10. You've earned your place there. Now you just need to believe it. This time Riley didn't enter anonymously. She filled out the application with her full name and submitted it before she could change her mind. When she told her family, they reacted in a way that still surprised her, even months after everything had changed. "When is it?" Daniel asked immediately. "I need to request that day off." "I'm clearing my calendar," Victoria announced. "Nothing is more important than this." Her father started researching the venue. Her mother smiled with pride that made Riley's chest tight with emotion. The competition was held at the Riverside Performing Arts Center, a beautiful theater with red velvet seats and acoustics designed specifically for classical music. Riley had never performed in a space like this. The stage seemed enormous. The piano was a 9-foot concert grand that probably cost more than everything Riley owned combined. The day of the competition, Riley's entire family arrived early. They sat in the third row, right in the center. Mrs. Chen was there too, along with Mrs. Walsh from her building, and even Mr. Patterson from work, who'd closed the office early to come. Riley watched the other performers from backstage. They were incredible. A 16-year-old prodigy who'd been playing since she was 4. A music professor from the university, a young man who'd studied at a conservatory in Europe. She was 8th in the lineup. By the time they called her name, her hands were ice cold and her heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy. She walked onto that stage, the lights bright and hot on her face. The audience was a dark sea of faces. She could just barely make out her mother in the third row, sitting forward in her seat. Riley sat at the piano. She adjusted the bench, placed her hands on the keys, and then she remembered something Mrs. Chen had told her once. "Don't play for the judges. Don't play for the audience. Play for the little girl who wanted to make beautiful music. Play for yourself." She took a breath and began. She'd chosen a different piece this time, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, 3rd movement. It was fast, technically demanding, full of passion and fire. Her fingers flew across the keys, the notes tumbling out in cascading runs and powerful chords. She made one mistake in the middle, a note that came out slightly off. For a split second, panic flared, but then she remembered, keep going. Don't stop. Let the music carry you, and it did. She poured everything into that performance. Not just the 3 years of practice, but everything that came before. All the years of feeling invisible, of being overlooked, of watching her siblings shine while she faded into the background. All of it went into the music, transformed into something powerful and beautiful and undeniably present. When she played the final crashing chords, the silence that followed lasted only a heartbeat before the applause began. Not polite applause, but enthusiastic, sustained clapping. People were standing up. Her mother was crying again, but this time with joy. Riley didn't win first place. She came in 3rd, bronze medal. But when they announced her name and she walked back onto that stage to accept her medal, the applause was just as loud as it had been for the winners, because winning wasn't really the point. Her mother hugged her so tightly afterward that Riley could barely breathe. "I am so proud of you," she whispered.
So incredibly proud.
"Not because you won a medal, but because you became yourself. You found your voice," Daniel surprised her by tearing up. "You're amazing, you know that? I can't believe we almost missed this." "Almost missed seeing who you really are." Victoria took a photo of Riley with her medal and immediately posted it online with a caption. "My sister is the most talented person I know, and I'm sorry it took me so long to realize it." At the reception after the competition, other musicians came up to talk to Riley. They asked where she'd trained, how long she'd been playing, if she taught lessons. She felt like an imposter at first, but then she realized she belonged here. She'd earned her place. Mrs. Chen found her near the end of the evening. "So what's next?" her teacher asked. Riley looked around the room at these people who'd accepted her as one of their own. She looked at her family, still beaming with pride. She thought about her tiny apartment and her second-hand piano, and all those early morning practice sessions when no one was watching. "I don't know," Riley admitted, "but I think that's okay. For the first time in my life, I'm not invisible. I'm not trying to be something I'm not. I'm just me, and that's enough." Mrs. Chen smiled. "More than enough." Riley never became a famous concert pianist. She never quit her job at the accounting firm or moved to some exciting new city. Her life from the outside probably still looked ordinary to most people, but she kept playing. She performed at local venues, taught piano lessons on weekends to kids who reminded her of herself. She played at her mother's 70th birthday party and made everyone cry with beauty of it. And every Sunday her family gathered at her apartment to listen to her play. Sometimes they'd talk about Daniel's work or Victoria's cases, but they always made time to ask Riley about her music, to really listen when she spoke, to see her, because that's what had changed. Not Riley's talent, that had been there all along. What changed was that the people who mattered finally opened their eyes and saw what had been in front of them the whole time. A quiet, determined woman who'd taught herself to be extraordinary, not for applause or recognition, but simply because she loved it. And in loving it, she'd found herself. Sometimes the most powerful transformations don't happen on stage or in front of crowds. Sometimes they happen in small apartments at 5 in the morning, in the space between who people think you are and who you know yourself to be. Riley had always